All right, this is the Pro Wrestling Illustrated podcast. I'm your host, PWI senior writer Al Castle, back once again with my co-host Brian Solomon. How's it going?
It's going very well, Al. Happy to be here as always.
Yeah, it's been a couple of weeks. You weren't around for the last one when we were talking 500, so we want to get your thoughts on that, which we will. But also, more importantly, want to get your thoughts on another publication, and it is your new book. I've got my digital version. I don't know how you're going to sign this. Maybe a Post-it or something.
How does that work? What is that? Because the
This
digital.
is Kindle.
Oh, it's on the Kindle. Okay, yeah. Oh, I thought it was okay. I didn't know what I was looking at there for a second. It looked like a DVD or something. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. So you are like deep in the throes now of like book promotion, right? And how is that all going?
Very busy.
Yeah. Do you enjoy this part of the whole process?
Yeah, I do. No, I do. It's a lot of time and effort. Like some days I have multiple ones to do. Sometimes it's answering the same questions over and over and over, like a press junket. But if you're a good sport, and it's a good problem to have, honestly, because you got to do that with stuff like this. You know, I'm not a celebrity. Like I can't just coast on a brand or name recognition. Like you have to really hustle and do as many of these things as you can so that people can't avoid you. You're everywhere. Like people tell me that, like, you're everywhere I look. This is ridiculous. Like, you know, my friends and stuff, or people that follow wrestling stuff. But that's what you need to do for a book like this.
And any early metrics to talk about?
Well, I mean, I know that it was the #1 wrestling book on Amazon for 2 weeks straight. It dropped down to #2 when this new Barry Darsow book came out. But no offense to Barry Darsow, I don't think that's going to last very long. I think that Gorilla will be back at #1 eventually. It's been 2 days now. But I've been told, I don't have numbers or anything, but I've been told by Mike Holmes at ECW Press that the sales have been, quote, phenomenal.
Great.
So much to the point where I think that they are really looking to get me going on another book right away. We're talking about some things. I don't know yet, but it could be happening. Something.
Are you okay with jumping right back into it, or do you want to take some time?
Well, I don't necessarily consider it jumping right back in because I actually finished writing the book a year ago. So the past year has been just all the other stuff, getting it ready for publication. And also I think they added extra months padding on purpose because they wanted to have it for the Christmas season. So it probably could have come out last summer. But I still could probably use a little bit of a breather because of all I'm doing now. I did 3 books right on top of each other, and they overlapped. And at times I was actually working on one while finishing up one while starting the other at the same time. So I don't mind taking a breather, but I would have to say within the next year or so, I would definitely be ramping up something new.
Yeah. Well, we are going to talk more about the book a little later on the show. Beyond the usual plug, want to ask you some of the questions that you've already asked a million times.
No, you're a good interviewer. That's not going to happen.
I'll be the latest to
I'll just say this. If you could possibly find it in your heart to not ask me, so what made you want to write a book about Gorilla Monsoon?
Right, cross that one out.
I'll be very happy. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. No. And we've talked some about the book, so I feel like some of the interviews have been done over the last year or so. But still looking forward to talk about that, and also obviously all the current events since we last talked. We've had a few major events, and we had a Crown Jewel last week, and probably the biggest news to come out of that we didn't learn about until the next day with word of Seth Rollins' injury, apparent injury. I don't know that it's been confirmed, but you had division turn on him, and all signs are that he's going to be on the shelf for a little while. What does this mean for WWE going forward? Seeing as how the company, in large part, was being built around Seth for the last few months, and now they're going to have to shift off that. We'll talk a little more Crown Jewel, the really fun AJ John Cena match. Really fun for me. I think people have different views of it. I don't think everybody loved it. And also kind of talking about what's left for John Cena here now that we're getting closer to the end of his farewell tour. Talk a little bit about AEW with WrestleDream coming this weekend. That might have already passed by the time you guys are hearing this. And some other big events in TNA and even New Japan. But right now, let me tell you about the PWI 500, the 30, I've lost track. Are we 34th, 35th annual? PWI 500.
35.
35, yes. Started in 1991. Then you got Cody Rhodes, ranked number 1 for the second year in a row over at pwi-online.com. You can pick it up, subscribe. Brian, we haven't gotten a chance to talk about the 500 since it dropped. You really convinced me about Cody. I remember that meeting, and I went in there feeling pretty good about Gunther earning number 1. You made the case for Cody, and I think it was the right one. How do you think this year's 500 holds up and this year's number 1 holds up?
I think Cody earned that spot. It's not something that I would say lightly. It's not like you're going to throw multiple number 1s at people all the time. They have to really earn it. Austin did it when he was on that white hot run. Bret Hart did it. Cena did it, right? Those are the other 3.
Yeah.
I think, right?
Yeah.
And Cena was on that hot run. Sometimes when you look back at these guys, maybe not Austin because he had kind of a short time there, but like Cena, he probably could have had more than 2 in a row with all those hot years that he
Brett might have done it, right? No.
Has anybody ever won like in non-consecutive years or like more than twice?
Cena is tied with Seth for the record at 3.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, this seemed the time for Cody. You look at the run that he's had the last 2 years. He really deserves it. I know we have other metrics than this, but I mean, he's been arguably the top star in the business now, especially in the post Roman Reigns era. And you could definitely say that the hottest baby face in the business even before that. So, he works so hard. I mean, I know they don't do house shows anymore, but when they were, I mean, constantly wrestling more matches, I think, than anyone else in the business on a yearly basis, at least in a major company. And being the champion for so long, winning defending the title successfully, it felt like the right thing for me. And I'm glad that we all agreed eventually and we went with that. I think it gives the list a lot of credibility because how this goes. Every year it's like you get all these people that come out of the woodwork and they scream and yell. And sometimes if you have a choice that's easier to defend, it lifts up the whole 500.
The legitimacy of it.
Yeah.
You're more tied into social media than I am. I think. What's been your sense about how it's been received? I mean, you touched on. It seems like nobody's got a huge problem with Cody, but anything else emerge as a talking point? Well, I did a Sirius XM show with Tommy Dreamer and Jonathan Coachman, and the one beef that they brought up right away was no Roman on the list, which was an activity issue, and it's something we've talked about. But other than that, I mean, I haven't heard too much complaining, I don't think.
Yeah, well, you always get that thing every year where people don't get the rules, or they get the rules and they don't agree with them.
Yeah,
you have people that don't.
I'm not sure I agree with them.
I mean, Cena doesn't make the list because he hardly wrestled, and you're talking Cena and Roman Reigns; those are like the 2 biggest names in all of wrestling, and they're not on the list. I could see that. The thing that I've noticed though in the past few years, there's been less fighting. I don't know. I'm hoping that it's just not because people care less or less people are looking at it. I don't think it's that. I think it's just that we've been doing a really good job.
Yeah, I think maybe we're getting a little better at it, actually.
The number 1s have been great. What I notice is there's more quibbling, especially because how we will always put out the top 10 first, right? So we do that, right? Top 10 early.
Well, I mean, it all drops, and
the top 10 gets a lot of publicity. Like a lot of websites share it because they're not going to list the whole 500. We wouldn't want them to anyway. But so the top 10, there is always some little bit of like, what's that person doing there? Oh, that's ridiculous. I see 2 things that happen a lot, which is people that don't get, the luchadors and the Japanese wrestlers on there because they're not following that and they're looking at it from a very North American centric, US Canada centric view and going like, what the hell? Like some Japanese guy they never heard of, unfortunately. Mm-hmm. The other thing I see, and I don't know if you see the same thing, we try to be very fair with WWE and AEW, for example, because that's really the top 10 is a lot of those guys, is people tend to scoff sometimes when we rate some AEW stars over some WWE stars. And like, I know that happens with Moxley, and they'll go like, how in the world? Because they're looking at Moxley's admittedly horrible world title run that he had with the Death Riders. And they're going like, come on, how is X wrestler from AEW above X wrestler from WWE? Because they're only thinking of it as WWE is the hotter company. The stars are more recognizable and known. How could you rank this AEW guy over? Like, in their mind, the whole top 10 should be like almost all WWE guys for some of these people. But they're not looking at it the way we do. They're not using our criteria and things. So again, a lot of it just comes back to not understanding or not agreeing with that. But for the most part, like I said, it's been less and less, which I take as a good sign.
Yeah, and I think you get it in the reverse too. I mean, if you're on like an AEW message board, complaints might be, how is Mox not number one?
Right. No, that does happen for sure. People say that all the time. Moxley, actually, it's so funny. He's so polarizing.
Yeah.
I did hear, it's definitely more on the WWE side of fans, but I did hear
Well, there are more
going,
WWE fans.
Right.
Yeah.
But I did hear people going, oh, Moxley should have been number one because he carried AEW on his back, which he kind of did to a certain degree. And, you know, and then you get the other people going, how is Moxley anywhere near the top? You know, it's like you're either on one side or the other. It's crazy.
Yeah. And what that tells you is that, you know, we probably got it right, you know, and you know, in my day job, if I do a story and I get, you know, hate mail from both sides, that tells me I nailed it, you know?
Right.
So anyhow, I mean, dig into it yourselves over at PWI-online.com. 500 entries. It is the biggest lift that we do all year. It really is kind of our signature, the PWI 500. We are deep into ranking season. I've been working on the women's 250 top 10 all week. Actually had a dream / nightmare last night about the tag team list. Thinking like, oh my God, there are no tag teams. Where do all the tag teams go? And I think it might kind of become a reality in that, like, how the hell do we put together
I just
a
have
tag
one
team list in this climate?
There's one important thing to remember. Please, please, please make sure that you don't leave out the Hardy Boys. Okay.
Yes. No. You know, the problem
we owe them.
I bet they're very much in the mix. This year. Yeah.
They should. They've got to be high. They've got to be on the top 10. I mean, you know, they've got to be.
Well, you know,
they had a great year.
I wanted to talk a little bit about a Bound for Glory. So why don't we get it out of the way? You know, TNA's biggest show of the year, and this was probably the signature match of it this year. Not billed as the main event, nor in the main event spot, but probably more people came to this for Dudley's versus Hardy's than anything else. And you're going to get mixed reviews about it. You know, 4 guys in their 50s going out there and trying to kind of relive their 20s with a crazy stunt match. All things considered, I enjoyed it. I mean, I don't have I think it was a fine swan song, no pun intended, for you know, these two really important acts of a certain generation. And given their limitations, especially a guy like Devon, who hasn't wrestled in I don't know how many years, that they were able to put this together at all was really super impressive. I thought it was really emotional. I think they gave it the right amount of time, and I thought it turned out pretty well. You wouldn't want to see it every year or so, but if this was truly the Dudley's farewell, as they made it appear to be, I thought it was a fitting farewell.
Yeah, and it was a special thing. To be honest with you, I was surprised with the WWE relationship that WWE didn't try to steal that match, honestly, and say, no, that's going to be on our show. And, you know, we'll present them as TNA guys, but that's going to be on our show. Because actually, I mean, you know, I did some research on this when I was writing it up for the Wrestling News. They have not had a 2-on-2 tag team match, Dudley's versus Hardy's, on television in 10 years. So 10 years. So it's actually pretty special. It's not like, oh, these guys again. Like, it was actually a cool thing, especially when you think about younger fans who might have been very little back then, or maybe weren't even watching yet, and they've heard about these guys. It's pretty cool. I mean, no, okay, so they can't do what they did at WrestleMania 16 or 17. So what? Who could do what they did 25 years ago? The fact that
you could also argue that they shouldn't be doing
right. And honestly, they did a lot more than even they would be expected to do.
Yeah.
in a match like that. And it's all to their credit. It wasn't the main event. I mean, it was a very special thing. I can't understand how anybody would criticize that. I mean, it was a very cool thing to do, I thought.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I really agree, and I have been surprised at that WWE has not, with the Hardys in particular, who are essentially full time. They've kind of been hands off with them. You know,
Yeah.
I went to the NXT show Roadblock that they did at the theater at Madison Square Garden back in March, and I thought the Hardys versus Fraxium would be like this huge match that WWE would look to really showcase, because Fraxium was their number 2 tag team, I think, last year in our rankings. Maybe the hottest tag team act they had for a while. And the Hardys, I mean, it really was like 2 generations. It was the opening match in a show in the theater at Madison Square Garden. It was just like a Tuesday show. I mean, I thought that was nuts. And we haven't seen the Hardys on Raw, SmackDown pay-per-views. And I think they'd get a huge reaction. I'm not saying put the titles on them or anything, but right. I'm surprised how little they've done with them.
I'm wondering if some of that is the bridge burning of Jeff Hardy and the way he walked out, literally just walked out of the company in the middle of a match, that kind of thing. I mean, nobody does that. I mean, wrestlers do crazy things. That was insane. And all of his issues over the years. I'm wondering if it's partly that, where they're just sort of, kind of lukewarm on them in a way. I mean, like, I wouldn't be surprised. I don't know that for a fact,
Yeah. Anywho, other thing from Bound for Glory, Santana finally wins the world title. I think TNA has made huge strides in from where they were years ago, and you saw another packed house for Bound.
Another record, another attendance.
I mean, it's incredible. I was there for Slammiversary. I think it's a good product. My one criticism, and I think this has been a persistent problem, is that their timing can be really off. I think that was the case with Joe Hendry a couple of years ago, where there was this period where he was really hot, and they waited and they waited and they waited. And by the time they finally put the title on him, he kind of cooled off. And now, whatever it is, a couple of years later, I think it's clear that they didn't get everything out of him that they could have. And I'm seeing the same thing with Santana. I was in the building, UBS Arena here in kind of New York, a metro area, minutes away from his house. All the Puerto Rican flags for Slammiversary. This place was ready for Santana to be coronated, the new standard bearer for TNA, and they had that stupid schmaz finish where Trick held on to the title just so you could do it here at Bound for Glory. They missed that peak. Right. And again, I'm glad to see them finally put the title on Santana. Again, some weird, questionable, unnecessarily complicated booking at the end with the people cashing in and Kazarian and
they're learning too much from WWE, I think.
Yeah. I mean,
you can't ever have like a straight ahead, clean finish to a big match. You've got to do all this circus atmosphere,
Yeah. But what do you think Mike Santana brings to the table? I mean, is he the right guy for this spot?
He's a very interesting case to me, because we've been talking about in the past few years how some AEW talent has been showing up in WWE. I mean, I'm talking about people that had never been there before, had never been that big before, like, Cody'd been there before, but not anywhere near the level, or Jade Cargill, Ethan Page, those kind of guys, Ricky Stark / Saints. Now, Mike Santana, he's not in WWE, but because they have this close relationship with WWE, that it feels like another of these AEW guys that's now interacting with WWE talent, now put in a very high position as the TNA World Champion. We know he'll definitely be popping up more on NXT and things like that. And, it's just, it's definitely a good spot for him to be in. It's nice to see, he was in limbo. He was one of those guys in AEW just rotting away on a shelf somewhere, which seems to be their trademark. And it's nice to see him thriving a bit more in this way, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, one thing that we talk about often as being that a quality that is so important in wrestling and also so elusive is authenticity. And I think that's what Mike Santana has in spades. I mean,
the thing with his daughter.
You're a Bronx guy, right? I'm a Bronx guy.
I'm Brooklyn.
Oh, Brooklyn, all right. I'm a Bronx guy. I mean, like I went to school with millions of Mike Santanas. I mean,
Uh-huh.
that guy. I mean,
Totally.
that's as real as it gets. You know, that he is that
Oh
guy.
yeah, I feel that way about Eddie Kingston too. He's just
Yeah,
like,
right,
it's like he walked, right out of the bodega and into the wrestling ring.
right.
Like I just love. He's like a New York guy.
Yeah, yeah. It comes through, and I think it's the right act at the right time. I think it would have been more of the right time back in June at Slammiversary, but nevertheless, yeah, glad to see them put the title on him. Let's talk about probably the bigger show of last week, and that was a crown jewel. And as I touched on, probably the biggest piece of news was afterwards when we learned that Seth Rollins appears to be injured in that crazy bump, the coast to coast headbutt. It seems like they were hiding his arm injury the next night, and then the big shock with Braun and Bronson betraying him, and all signs are that he's going to be off TV for a while. I know there's been some pictures caught of him with his arm in a sling, and it sounds like he's going to need surgery. In some ways, couldn't come at a worse time because he was doing some of the best work of his career. He might have been on pace, and maybe still is. We'll see what happens for that fourth PWI 500 #1 ranking, which would be a record. But really, in a lot of ways, I mean, WWE was being built around Seth Rollins, and you saw it from the fact that they had him beat Cody Rhodes, which is something that you just don't do.
Right.
And I mean,
now he's gone.
Yeah, and now he's gone for a long time. So timing wise, terrible. There's always the silver lining of absence makes the heart grow fonder. Does he come back in 6 months even hotter as a super hot baby face, looking for revenge against Braun Breaker, that kind of thing. But talk about the timing, and then there's also the opportunity that comes out of this for a guy like Braun Breaker, who maybe gets pushed into main event stardom, maybe even a world title, probably far before he was going to.
Well, there's no way that this is a worked injury like the other one, because there's no way they'd plan it this way. You beat Cody Rhodes, you beat your WWE champion, and then the guy just disappears. And now Cody Rhodes, that doesn't help anybody. And on top of that, all the buildup for the what's the name of the group, the Vision, and there's no way that they would just take Seth out of that equation at this point. It's so early to do something like that. But like you said, that's how wrestling is now. Those other guys could benefit from this. To me, and I think with a lot of people, Breaker is definitely the one. I mean, I love both those guys, but Breaker's the guy with the big upside, I think, in the company. So maybe this does wind up being this moment. I mean, you and I have been fans a very long time. We've seen these scenarios where guys get pushed into positions that maybe was not planned exactly. Sometimes they sink and sometimes they swim, and I think Braun Breaker's a guy that could definitely swim. So that could be the best thing that comes out of this. But it's unfortunate because you just knew they were going to go other places with it. It seemed like they were now going to set up Punk and Rollins now with the, another go around with a lot of momentum for Rollins. And probably you'd have to imagine with all the water under the bridge that they would probably finally have Punk win the world title from Rollins. At least that would be the sensible thing to do. Now it's all kind of limbo. It's all kind of up in the air. Do we know what they're going to do with the title? Have they?
No, and forgive me if I sound a little different. I realized my mic was off, so I just turned it on. But Saturday night's main event in Utah is coming up November 1st. It was supposed to be Punk and Rollins. Does it just now become Punk and Breaker for the vacant title? I mean, that would certainly be like a big selling point. I mean, in terms of other things that are maybe lost, all signs were pointing to a big Rollins Roman Reigns match at WrestleMania.
Well,
I mean,
but even that,
could he be back in time for that? I mean, potentially,
right? But even that could be fortuitous because now you have something you didn't have before. So let's say you do something like that, Punk wins the title ostensibly. I mean, you could go the Breaker route too, because I'm assuming Rollins will come back as a face. So if you go with either man, now you have Rollins come back, and it's sort of like, well, you didn't beat me. You have that old chestnut, which everybody loves. You never beat me. So now you got a built-in feud right there that you wouldn't have had if he was healthy.
I think you do go with Breaker, you know.
Yeah, now that you mention it, yeah, I think that might be what they do.
Yeah, because Breaker needs it more than Punk, right?
Yeah.
And if you're really trying to get Breaker up and running as a top guy, you don't want him losing to CM Punk. I mean, you want him, really to look, not dominate that he should squash Punk, but he should show that he can hang with those guys. And yeah, I mean, I think it is fortuitous, like you said, because the reality is, and even Mike Santana, I think, is an example that with so many of these guys. Understandably, WWE just sort of waits and waits and waits and waits until like everything is just right and all the stars align, and before you know it, a guy's getting, his first world title reign around 40. I think Breaker is still in his 20s, right?
Yeah,
And
that's good to see, because this has got to
right,
be
but I don't think it would
on
have happened on
average.
its own.
This has got to be on average the oldest WWE roster
Yeah,
we've ever seen.
yeah,
It's really wild, and I know everybody says guys age slower today, and there's better health and there's better nutrition, and that's true. I mean, they certainly don't look like the wrestlers in their 40s did, say 30 years ago. But they're still in their 40s. I mean,
yeah.
they can't do the things they used to do. They may look like $1 million, but they're still aging. So anytime you get people like Breaker and those people to break this thing up, and God, even Logan Paul, like to break it up and have some younger guys going in there, Dominic Mysterio, it's always good.
Yep. Yeah, and just for planning purposes, looking ahead, it's like you put the world title on Breaker now and establish him as a main eventer. You may have a main eventer for the next 20 years. Which Punk is not going to be main eventing in 20 years. It's just the reality. So yeah, I do hope that is it maybe a little faster than it should be. Sure, but I think it's better as long as they handle it right. I think it's a good thing. I'll say. I'm as high on Braun Breaker as anybody, but I also I think he's got a lot to learn. I don't think he's a finished product, as great as he is, and that's no slight on him. He is probably ahead of where he should be at this age. So I do worry a little bit about sort of like, you think about like the push that Drew McIntyre got, whatever it was, 15 years ago, and he's the first to say it happened before he was ready to handle it. And it set him back in some ways. So I do worry about that whole too much too soon for Braun Breaker. But I think it's great that he's got Paul Heyman on his side, not just on air, but it sounds like he really is an ally and kind of a cheerleader for him. And that's a good guy to have in your corner, helping guide your career. And as you touched on, I think Bronson is, sometimes he gets kind of lost in the shadows a little bit. I think Bronson is fantastic, and I've thought for a long time, different look, a different style. He works like a great big man style. I'm glad to see him get the win over Roman Reigns, which is another thing that you just don't see. So both those guys seem to be up and running. Speaking of older guys, let's talk about AJ and John Cena. I didn't see this in real time, but started seeing people talk about it as like the match of the decade. So I was very eager to see it and got a huge kick out of it. I mean, it is, it was a great match, not in like a traditional, I don't know if I've ever seen a match like this. It was kind of like a love letter to wrestling and to, it's like seeing a tribute band play all the hits. But it was so much fun, and you got lost in like, well, what are they going to do next? Whose move are they going to do next? I loved when they started chanting 619, and I was watching with my kid, and it's like, no, he's not going to do a 619, and then he sets up for the 619, and everybody's just going crazy, and it was just so much fun. I mean, just moving, and that they were able to do it with both those guys who've had such different careers. So Cena kind of tributing these huge WWE stars of the last 20 years, AJ tributing some Ring of Honor stars, some TNA stars, some New Japan stars. It was just a crazy, wacky match that, to their credit, it wasn't just a series of spots. They put it together in a cohesive way where it did have the rhythm of a match, in that not everything landed. Again, he went for the 619, but it was blocked, and there was a lot of that, and just thoroughly fun and satisfying. And I just loved it. And where was this John Cena a few months ago?
I know. Well, he had already been stepping it up a bit. I know like the Logan Paul match, if I remember, was terrific. He's been getting that ring rust off. It took a long time, but he's an older guy and he's not wrestling full time anymore. I mean, nobody is. So I mean, at least not by the old standards of full time. So he's in that groove. And these are two guys that they always work great together. Yeah. I still remember their SummerSlam match from years ago and how awesome that was. One of the best matches from that era. And I'm glad to this time around, because of the working relationship with TNA, they were able to lean even more into that WWE versus TNA kind of thing. I think at one point, one of them said, years ago, this would have been the TNA world champion against the WWE world champion. They said something like that. And it's very cool to see. This is the kind of feel-good stuff you want to see in the John Cena retirement tour more than what they were giving fans. And I could see that now in hindsight,
Yeah. Well, talking about that, so we're really getting close to the end now. I think there's only he's got some appearances. He's going to be in the Garden, MSG, and we don't know how many of those become matches. Maybe a few of them do, but we're probably down to 3 or 4 matches. Word is, I think the Observer is reporting that his last match in DC on Saturday Night's Main Event, it's going to be against Gunther. There's talk that he might be working with Dominic Mysterio at War Games in San Diego. And so maybe we've got a match or 2 left. And who's on your wish list that you'd very much want to see him work against?
I really like the idea of having him wrestle younger guys that he never worked with before. So Gunther and Mysterio are big on my list. I'd rather see that than the Lesners and things. And, even Punk, it's like, okay, I want to see him. The fun of it is seeing him work with the new generation. Breaker could be amazing. Yeah. That would be amazing. And as far as the Gunther thing goes, it's interesting to me because they did this thing where they had Brock Lesnar beat him, which felt a little weird, and especially because they're not doing anything else with it. So it was kind of like this downer. But so I feel like if that hadn't happened, I might have imagined, okay, Gunther should beat Cena in his last match. Maybe that's how it all ends. But having done that with Lesnar, I just think you don't want to beat him again by like another big monster. Like, why do that? It's sort of like cruel to the fans. So now I feel like he probably should win that match. He probably should go out strong. Gunther has nothing to lose. He rarely loses. I think we need a feel-good ending to this retirement tour, especially after that Lesnar thing.
I wonder if now with things being shuffled with Seth out, which would have also been a fun match to see because they have a little bit of a history. I wouldn't mind seeing them call an audible and move Breaker into that last match spot, maybe even for the world title. I mean, can you tell the story that, I want to get 18 on my way out, that kind of thing, and do it and have, in that case, you would have Cena lose, I think, but it could be more meaningful. Yeah. When I heard Gunther, I get, why you would want that spot to go to Gunther. I don't know what kind of story they could tell between now and then to make that feel that special.
You do like the Rocky IV thing. I know it's a cliche. Everybody says, do Rocky III, do Rocky IV. But it's like, you got the aging star, the big giant powerhouse guy, foreign menace who's going to destroy you. Can this over-the-hill wrestler find a way? He's much smaller to beat this guy. We know he's vulnerable. We know he's lost in the past. What's he going to do here? This young guy doesn't give a damn about his legacy, and he's going to crush him and destroy him. It's as simple as that. It's the oldest story in the book, but I just don't know where they want to go with it if that's the match. I hope they would have Cena win. I really do. We'll see.
Yeah. I'm not 100% convinced this is really the end of.
I know. It's wrestling. You're right.
Yeah. I mean, how many times have you seen these? No, this really is it.
The only thing that makes me think, okay, probably is because he has so much other stuff to do that is also a lot more lucrative. You know what I mean? It's not like he's just going to be some retired wrestler sitting at home, bored out of his mind or opening a gym somewhere. Like, no. He's doing this for a reason because he wants to focus hardcore on his movie career. and make a lot more money for a lot less work. So
Yeah,
that's why I think it probably is going to stick.
We're big Peacemaker fans here,
Yeah.
and watch the whole season. He's becoming a good little actor. I mean,
Yes.
there were a few episodes where he really had to show some emotional range that we haven't seen, and he delivered in a big way. So yeah, and he's really got something. I mean, and it's what wrestling fans, I think, always saw, and I think he's been cast in roles like this, but there is sort of this dorky kind of charm that is perfect for the Peacemaker role. That really is John Cena. That is really coming through, and he's just a very likable guy. So I think he can have a great wrestle, which is wild seeing him wrestle as much as he has. And I wrote in the 500 my take about. And I get why we've got the activity standards, and I understand you can only reduce them so much before it's like, all right, you got to wrestle a handful of times.
But we also have to keep in mind that guys are wrestling a whole lot less now than they used to.
Right, sure. So
that might be
as
something to think about. Yeah.
It is all to say Cena kept a pretty full schedule. And in fact, he would have, if one of the matches he had, he like moved 2 weeks or something like that, he would have been ranked, because he needed one in, I think, July, and I think he had 2 in June. So if he just pushed one in July, he would have been fine. But it's all to say he's worked a lot this year and is out there really working, even when early in the year it wasn't that pretty. And I think it's fair to say one of the worst WrestleMania main events we've had in many, many years, because I do think he was still kind of trying to get his sea legs underneath him, and also the heel thing wasn't working. He's so much more comfortable in this role. And that said, I don't, if there is a silver lining here, it might have been that seeing him in that heel role, which everybody thought they wanted to see for so long, wouldn't it be cool if, and seeing it just not work, I think maybe made people appreciate what makes him such a great baby face. And now he has been absolutely just showered with adoration from fans. And I think there is a real appreciation every time you see him come out and, hold up the towel and salute, that you're watching something special, and we're down to the end of it. So it really does feel, special.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Let's shift a little bit to AEW. They've got kind of a big show coming this weekend in WrestleDream. I mean, not one of their real kind of tentpole shows, but a pay-per-view, an opportunity for Hangman Page to sort of, continue to establish himself as a world champion. Kind of paint by numbers what they've done with Samoa Joe. I think Joe is a fine opponent to help him get established, the former world champion. I think they'll have a good match. I think it's a guy that Page could and should win. I expect to see that. I think the match that probably is getting more attention is Darby Allin and Moxley in an I Quit match. And I got to tell you, I'm terrified of what they're going to do here.
I don't even want to ponder it. I wonder if they're going to stage the match on the top of Mount Everest and see who could throw the other guy off the mountain,
Yeah. And I'm legit, concerned for their safety and just bracing myself for something. I mean, you can't judge it before it happens, but these guys are like the absolute purveyors of everything I hated about AEW. as and it's not a slight of them, because I think there's both, all the caveats, super talented, but nobody's there to reel them in. I don't know what they're gonna do. I mean, when the match buildup literally involves flamethrowers, I can't imagine what the actual
a Molotov cocktail he threw. I mean,
yeah.
But this show is really hanging on those two matches that you mentioned more than I think we often see. Like these AEW cards, it tends to be the big money matches are more spread out. I mean, they've done a pretty good job of that. I mean, a lot of their pay-per-views are really solid. This one, it's really hung on those two. I'm not saying the other matches aren't of interest. There certainly are, but like those are the ones. And I guess to a lesser degree, Jurassic Express versus Young Bucks. Partly, well, the novelty of reuniting them and having them go against the Bucks, but it's definitely Hangman and Samoa Joe and Allen and Moxley for sure that are like carrying that show.
Yeah. What do you think we're going to get out of Moxley and Darby?
Same thing that you're afraid of, just absolute pandemonium. You're going to get like insane amounts of blood, more than you need, and just probably hard way, crazy, ridiculous props, broken glass, all, fire. I think for sure it's going to be one of those where, let me put it this way, they're not going to quit to a wrestling hold. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They're going to quit because of being tortured in some way.
Look, and it's not to be like overly squeamish about this kind of thing. I understand why you would do this kind of match with these two guys, and I get that there's going to be some expectations for it. I guess my hope is that they are, they work as safely as possible under the framework of this kind of match, which is to say there are things that look more dangerous than they are. And I hope they do that stuff,
But the ante has been upped on a lot of these stipulation matches in both companies to a certain degree. Like, it's funny to me how, when they would do a last man standing match, which used to be sort of like a Texas death match, the idea was, these guys are going to fight. They're going to wrestle and fight until one man can't do it anymore and he can't get up and he's counted down. And that used to be the idea. It was just like total exhaustion, or maybe you got knocked out. Now they do things where it's like, we're just going to pile a bunch of heavy stuff on you so you can't get up. Like, they've raised everything to the point where it can't just be two guys having a match. Like an I quit match, not every time, because you had Magnum TA and Tully with the metal, the wooden spike and all that.
It's that quaint by
but it's true. But a lot of I quit matches, like Terry Funk and Ric Flair and a lot of those, it would just be like, again, we're gonna have a really long, grueling match, and one guy is gonna quit because he just can't take it anymore. And now we have to have it where it's like, beyond the bounds of actual, real human endurance into just complete insanity.
Yeah, and what gets me like queasy is when they start doing the really kind of gory stuff, mangling somebody's ears, or when you have the nails stuck to Moxley's back.
I still think about the thing where he had the thing stuck in his head or whatever that was, and right.
There's like the syringe in the mouth. Ugh.
Some of that doesn't need to happen. I still think about that, the syringe in the mouth, where you could even tell that JR himself was just legitimately disgusted. He was not selling that. He was just like, what are we doing, guys? What is this?
Yeah, and this is where you hope there's a grown-up in the back that kind of reels them in somewhat. All right, let's talk about your book. Excited to talk about it, even though we've talked about it a lot in the last few months. So what made you...
Oh, no. See ya.
So I've started to go through them very early on, and it's fascinating, as always. You go through the photos first. It's incredible seeing some photos of Gorilla kind of lean. Right. I mean, once upon a time, he was like very much an athlete. This is back in the 60s. How much? What was your knowledge of Gorilla Monsoon before you started digging into him? I mean, I know you were aware of him wrestling and obviously spending a lot of his career as a commentator, but were you a fan, like a big fan?
Yeah, I mean, like a lot of people our age or roughly around our age, I knew him as the commentator, of course, as a kid. I'm not that old, but growing up in the Northeast, though, and I knew older fans or older family members, so I knew he had been a wrestler, and I'd seen things on Coliseum Video and all that. So I'd had that idea that, he was actually a big star wrestler back in his day. But yeah, I was a fan. I mean, he was my favorite commentator as a young fan, for sure. I wasn't a crazy fan of Vince as an announcer. I thought a lot of times, I like going back and watching his earlier stuff, like when he's trying to be Howard Cosell. It's kind of like the 70s stuff. But I always thought he was too over the top. Mm-hmm. A lot of the stuff he did to me was very cringeworthy.
Very
Like,
cartoonish. Yeah.
yeah, like the fake laugh and the, dancing and doing all this dumb stuff. I felt like Gorilla, he had a lot more, I don't want to, it's a bad pun, but I mean, he had a lot more weight. He
Mhm.
brought more gravitas, but he could also be a hype man at the same time. And he built trust with the fans where you trusted in him that what he was saying was true. It wasn't like Vince had more of that used car salesman thing going on,
Yeah.
but I loved him with, especially as a kid, especially Jesse Ventura, because they
Mhm.
were like the big show team. You knew it was a big deal. Bobby Heenan with him was hilarious. And as I've gotten older, I've come to appreciate them the most, just because I love the fact that when you watch them now, you could tell how much they loved each other, even though they were pretending to hate each other. It just comes across so well. So, I mean, I was always a big fan of his. It wasn't like a big stretch for me to write this book.
Yeah, the dynamic with Bobby and Gorilla was more kind of volatile and them playing against each other. And Gorilla, even though he kind of kept that same role as he was the earnest babyface announcer with Jesse, it was more kind of collegial, right? I mean, the respect on screen was more apparent versus Bobby and Gorilla always kind of snapping at each other. But I totally agree, and like my ritual for the last, I don't know, most of my life to go to sleep is I got to have some old wrestling on in the background, and Gorilla Monsoon sort of puts me to sleep every
in a
night.
good way. I know what you mean, though.
It's very soothing. It's comforting. Yeah,
it's very comforting. He is, in a lot of ways now, the voice of old school WWF. Like, in all the clips, in all the packages, and all the documentaries, his voice is all over it. I sometimes feel like for younger fans who may not even know who he was, they may not even know the name, but they probably would recognize the voice because they've heard it so much and be like, who was that guy? People like, my kid who watches all these things. We've seen the Hulk Hogan, Andre the Giant stare down a million times, which is where I got the title for the book, Irresistible Force, right? He's like your wrestling uncle, It's sometimes really nice to hear him talk to, some of these times when he's on commentary. It's just very much like two guys hanging around, two old pros watching wrestling and calling it like a sport. Like, even some of his lesser teams, like him and Lord Alfred Hayes, I liked them together. Him and Pat Patterson. Some of the best stuff he did would be on the house shows like MSG or Philadelphia Spectrum, where maybe it wasn't as high stakes, so he could just sort of like not have to hype so much, but just really settle in and be more conversational. He was very good at it. He doesn't get enough credit as he deserves. He gets more now, I think, even than he did back then.
Do you have a sense of how much he was being produced in his headset over the years? I mean, you hear the stories now about, Vince screaming in people's ears. Was that going on with Gorilla?
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. Because if they had tried to do that, Gorilla would have just put down the headset and gone home. Like, he didn't need to be there. He was going to get paid regardless. He was making crazy money. Part of his deal was that he got 1.5 times opening wrestler match money for every show they did, whether he was there or not. So he could have just gone home at any time. He could have been like Freddie Blassie or some of those guys that just, saw the money come in and weren't doing all that much. He was there by choice. Vince was not going to be screaming in the headset at some of these older pros, especially the guys that had been around the company and were colleagues of his father. That's something he started doing later on when everybody was younger than him, and these were all guys that he hired and that sort of thing. The other thing about Monsoon was that he was the first one that Vince trusted to really be in that spot ever, because as a lot of people know, Vince was the play-by-play guy, the only play-by-play guy that they had for like probably about 12, 13, 14 years before he took over the company. He used to do the MSG shows by himself without a color guy every month. So he was very eager once he took over to have somebody he could trust. Not that he was going to totally walk away from TV, because he wouldn't want that. He liked being on camera, but to be able to take some of it off of his back, especially take the pay-per-views so that I could be in the back running everything. And he trusted Gorilla to do that. I mean, that spoke volumes that he would say, okay, now it's going to be me and you. You'll be the B, I'll be the A guy, you'll be the B guy, but on the pay-per-view, it's you. It's all you. So I think that spoke volumes.
How was it spotted that this guy may have the skills to be a good announcer? Was it his promo work as a wrestler?
I don't think it was the promo work. I think because in those days it was very standard babyface stuff. You know, in the '60s, he didn't talk at all as a heel. As a babyface, you know, the babyfaces didn't have a lot of color in their promos back in the day. Like that's why Dusty Rhodes was such an iconoclast, because he was different. So it was more like he was college educated. So, and he was very well spoken. And he also had a knowledge of having been in the ring. So he could bring all those things to bear. There were a few times that he did it in the earlier years. Like he used to promote shows on the Steel Pier in Atlantic City, and they would run on the Prism Network in the late 70s. And he would do commentary on those. And he would occasionally come in and do guest commentary. There's a really good example at the Philadelphia Spectrum, Superstar Graham versus Bruno Sammartino. And he steps in to do commentary for that match. And he's phenomenal. It's like he's been doing it for years. He's awesome. So I think that Vince saw that and said, okay, this guy can cut it. Also, he's not going anywhere. He's loyal to me. He's tight with the company. This is the guy. You know, who am I going to have do it? Captain Lou Albano? No, I'm not going to have Freddie Blassie can't do it. Arnold Skolin can't do it. Gorilla's the guy.
Did he like it? Did he like it more than wrestling? Was he ready to hang it up when he transitioned? Yeah.
He was one of those guys where it got to the point. I think part of it was his weight, his health. He got to the point where he'd had enough. Like by the late 70s, he was really looking to get out. He was only like 40 in the late 70s, and he was definitely saying, okay, this is enough. I'm going to start ramping it down. So he was very eager to have, because also he was very busy behind the scenes, right? He was doing a lot more than this. So the opportunity to commentate, he jumped. In fact, it was his insistence. When he made the deal to sell his shares in the company, part of the deal he had was that money I talked about, and part of it was, I want to be on TV. Like he said that, I want to be on TV. And by having him be that commentator, he would be on TV more than anyone else in the company. So that was he loved doing primetime with Bobby Heenan. It was his favorite part of the job. He wanted that. He wouldn't have had it any other way.
Yeah. When you think back on some of those primetime wrestling shows, I watch it all the time. I mean, sometimes he can't keep from cracking up, you know. To the point that, like, I imagine maybe some folks weren't happy about it because they're trying to sell like they don't like each other,
right?
But Heenan is so ridiculous that Gorilla can't compose himself.
Well, the interesting thing about that is it was a little more acceptable for Gorilla to lose it, because you could always play it off like he's just laughing at Bobby because he's such a moron and he's so ridiculous. The tougher thing was Bobby had to try very hard not to laugh, because that would really be breaking character. He shouldn't be laughing at Monsoon's lines. And there's a great one where they're talking about it. It made the rounds online where Monsoon's making fun of Heenan, and he goes, I've seen the motels you stay in. They have hot and cold running rats. And Heenan just loses it. He starts to laugh, and he has to like hide it and distract and change the subject. But you watch it now and you could tell, like I said, how they loved each other.
Yeah.
Like it's so clear that they're having such a good time. And Gorilla never got to do comedy before. Like a lot of people don't realize that. They take it for granted. He was always a very serious, person, serious wrestling announcer, never was going to be like a straight man. And working with, and even as a wrestler, serious on his promos. He wasn't funny at all.
Yeah.
And so he loved the chance to do that, to do something different,
I love whenever Heenan would have a phone at the desk, and
the banana phone, right? And
absolutely.
And Miss Betty and all that stuff. Yeah.
You talked about him having shares in the company. That's something that we've heard a little bit about over the years, that he was once part owner of the company, and I guess there was and maybe you could speak to how legitimate this was, that he might have been the guy, he might have been Vince McMahon. How were his wrestling sensibilities different than Vince McMahon? How different might have WWF looked if it was run by Gorilla Monsoon, in those heydays?
Well, Gorilla was handpicked, and that was one of the things I was amazed to discover. I had heard rumors about it. In fact, in an interview years ago, Vince said something to that effect to me, and I wasn't sure. He said my father had high hopes for Gorilla to succeed him. Then he confirmed it in the Netflix documentary too. And I think, you got to remember back then, Vince, they didn't have a very high opinion of Vince back in the 70s. He was the promoter's son. He had never done anything to really prove himself. He was always having money problems and failing at different businesses. Whereas Gorilla had proven himself. He was a wrestling guy. He got the business. He was really plugged in. He was running all the TV, running the shows. Vince Sr. wasn't. He wasn't like his son. Vince Sr. would sit in his office backstage like the Godfather and just handle business there. Gorilla was the boots on the ground, hands-on guy. So it was a no-brainer. And he was young. He was a lot younger. Another thing people don't realize, he was young enough to be Vince Sr.'s son. It wasn't like he was some crusty old crony. So he was well-positioned. And Vince had a very different vision. So the interesting thing is, because Gorilla had 25% of the company originally, and he had 20% by the time they sold it, because they brought in Arnold Skoland as a minority partner. If he had been allowed to take it over, it would be very different, I think, because Gorilla was a very smart guy and smart about business, but he was also a much more traditional guy than Vince. And he was much more respectful of the boundaries. Like an old school promoter, he had lots of friends in the other territories. He was not going to do what Vince did. He wouldn't have had that aggressive expansion. I do think the company was already immensely successful even before Vince took over. It was the most lucrative promotion already. It's like when people say, Vince started on third base or second base, right? So I think you would have had more of that. The company was already red hot. He probably would have expanded it into some markets that were dead, like Ohio and Michigan and, upstate New York, and there might have been a little touring. But I think because he was smart like that, he made TV deals. He got the company on Prism and things like that. But he would, the whole landscape of the business would have looked different in the sense that cable and syndicated TV and things were already killing the territories, the way a lot of that was working, and infomercials coming in and things like that. So I think you wouldn't have seen 20, 30 territories. I think what you probably would have had is wrestling would have you wouldn't have had one powerhouse national company. Wrestling would still be kind of like divided. You might have a handful of companies, like you might have had Crockett in the South and maybe the Von Erichs and World Class if they hadn't had all those tragedies. The AWA probably would have survived in some form. It wouldn't. So you would have had this thing where you would have had 3 or 4 companies probably sharing the pie of wrestling. However, having said that, I don't think that would have lasted. So I think it may have been like a good 10 years, and then the business probably would have fizzled out eventually, especially as those guys got older, Vern Gagne and Fritz and even Gorilla and Bill Watts, if he was around. I think wrestling would have become a relic eventually. It would have been a thing we would talk about today. Like, wow, you remember professional wrestling? Oh man. Yeah. That was, like the circus or
roller derby.
Roller derby is the big one. So I think that Vince doing what he did, I'm not one of these people that says, oh, he saved wrestling. He didn't save wrestling. He destroyed the entire industry. What he did is he lifted his company up, yes. Yeah. But I think by doing that, he extended the life of the pro wrestling business into today, which would not have happened, I think, if Gorilla had taken over. It would have been different.
Did Gorilla approve of what Vince did with the company and the direction he took it?
So it was kind of complicated. At first, he was furious because he was losing his shares and he didn't know if it was even going to succeed. In fact, he thought probably it wasn't. And he had Puerto Rico in his back pocket because he owned 10% of that territory. That would have been where he hunkered down if the whole thing didn't work out. So once he saw that it was going to work, because this deal was made in mid-82. You got to remember that. So it was like 2 years, 2.5 years before you could say, oh, wow, this is going to work. There was a limbo period in there. Once he saw it was working, they're doing 30 shows a month, whatever it is. And he's making the best money of his life, even better than he made as a part owner. I think that's when he started coming around. But he loved working there. But it came to a point, I think, by the time you get to the mid 90s, I think it becomes more conflicted. Because in the mid 90s, he started seeing a lot of stuff he didn't like. I don't think he was the biggest fan of a lot of the over-the-top, gimmicky, cartoonish stuff. You started getting a lot of younger guys who their work wasn't up to his standards. And on top of that, the business was failing. So it wasn't even like you could say, well, at least we're making a lot of money, because they weren't anymore. And so there was a lot of, malaise. And then you get into the late 90s, it gets complicated again, because with the Attitude Era, which he was there for most of it. People forget he was there floating around in the midst of the Attitude Era. Austin McMahon, he was around. He may not have been on TV a lot. He was around. There was this sense of like, okay, now we're making money again, but I'm not comfortable with a lot of this stuff. And that was true. A lot of those old school guys, they kept their mouth shut. Even you hear even like Pat Patterson and those guys, they weren't thrilled with running around in their underwear and all the Stooges stuff. But they knew it was making money, so they kind of went with it. And so, like, I don't think he was a fan of a lot of the Attitude Era stuff, like the language and the sex. And he wasn't going to object publicly, but privately he did. There are conversations he had that came out later after he died, kind of candid conversations where he used the word, he would say, like, they've perverted the business. I don't think he was very much a man of his generation and his time. He wasn't thrilled with the McMahon's wrestling and all that kind of stuff. But he was sort of out of the loop by that point anyway. So, he was kind of not really going to rock the boat.
Yeah, you definitely see a drop off in his announcing it somewhere in the 90s that I always thought had to do with a few things. One was losing his best broadcast partners. And I'll get to Joey Morello, which is probably what you were anticipating.
Yes.
But Heenan is gone. Ventura's gone. And he didn't have the best chemistry with some of these other guys. Also because he had nobody to play off of. It was all kind of too nice. I'd never liked him with Ross. I didn't think they made a good team. Well, how did some of those other announcers look at him? How much of was he a mentor? I know you talked to Sean Mooney, who I'm a big fan of. Was he working with these guys and trying to help them?
Yeah, he was helping out some of those guys. Sean Mooney, like you said, was very loyal to him and loved him. And then you would get situations like you said, him and Jim Ross, not the best because you didn't have a heel there. Not that you always need a heel announcer, but Gorilla, it was tough for him to be in a color position. He was better as the lead. But you also can't have JR in the color position either. So it didn't really work so well. But then you'd have him work with some of these other guys where you could tell they were trying to recreate the magic. They put him with Ted DiBiase. They put him with Johnny Polo and things like that. And it was like the Polo thing, they were trying to recreate Bobby Heenan with like a younger, hipper version of Bobby Heenan.
Yeah.
And it was forced, I thought. I don't think it was that great. And then when he would work with people like DiBiase, and I think he may have even worked a little with Stan Lane, what I heard from some producers and things was Gorilla was feeding them everything, those guys, especially DiBiase. DiBiase was one of those guys, a great wrestling promo. He struggled as a commentator. Superstar Billy Graham, same thing. Yeah. They were good at putting themselves over, not good at putting other things over. And their producer, Tommy Carlucci, told me Gorilla would give Ted DiBiase all the great heel things that he wanted them to say. He was sort of like puppeting that stuff. So that, he didn't have to do that with Bobby or with Jesse. So he probably wasn't thrilled with having to do that later on. I remember also hearing one of the last teams that he worked with, I know this sounds insane, in like 99, he was doing International Superstars, International Shotgun Saturday Night. Who the hell knows where these shows were even going? And the team was Michael Cole, Dr. Tom Pritchard, and Gorilla Monsoon. It's wild. Which is insane.
I've looked for some of this. I think I found a little bit, but they're hard to find. Yeah.
I think sometimes Raymond Rougeau was in there too, if it was like Canadian. And Dr. Tom said Dr. Tom was not thrilled with working with him because it was sort of like the chemistry. Gorilla was trying to needle him and say all the kind of stuff he would say to Bobby and give him crap and make fun of him. And Dr. Tom just felt like he was burying him. He just didn't get it. He didn't understand. And maybe he didn't have the ability to fight back as well as those other guys did. And again, it just didn't work. And, the magic was gone.
The best of that bunch from the 90s, as far as the heel commentators, and even he didn't last that long into the 90s, was Hennig. I thought Mr. Perfect was pretty good.
They did, and they actually did at least one show together. There was a WWF Superstars. They did the 10th anniversary.
I remember that. Yes.
Yeah. It was a one-shot thing, 1996. It was just a highlight show.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it was Mr. Perfect and Gorilla Monsoon. I think it's the only time. He also did one show with Jerry Lawler, which is another weird team.
Yeah.
Where it was during the period where JR was fired, one of those little windows, and they were mixing things up, trying things. And it was typically in that time, it would be Vince and Lawler. But there was 1 week where they plugged in Gorilla, and I think it's the only time they ever worked together.
Yeah, and as I touched on, the other thing that I think was pretty, you saw a big drop off in the enthusiasm was after his son died, and I remember he took some time off of TV, and I was a kid I was probably 13, 14 at the time, and being aware of it, and then when he came back on TV, even at that age, I could recognize that like there's something off, you know, it's a little too put on. It is that guy who is heartbroken, but he's at the party and he's putting on a brave face for everyone, and that's so hard to do. And trying to sell a product when you're dealing with something like that.
Yeah, and that was the big difference. The big difference is the Gorilla Monsoon you used to see on TV. That was just him. Yeah. Like his daughter said to me, he talked that way all the time. He would use those expressions. He wasn't putting something on. He was just him sitting down at the broadcast table and just doing it. Whereas in those later years after Joey, his passion was gone, his energy was gone, his joy was gone. So what he would do is he would put that on for the cameras. He would turn it on. He would become Gorilla Monsoon. And then away from the camera, he was just like a ghost, like a shell. Yeah. That's what changed.
How much did he enjoy his stint as president, on-air president?
That was good for him. That was also something he wanted because so he had the deal, like I said, always. You always have to include me on TV. So they were never going to just put him out to pasture.
What was that about? I mean, is it just ego? Did he just like being on television?
I think it's because he didn't want to just fade away like a lot of these old time guys did. You know, they faded away. Even eventually people like Lou Albano and Freddie Blassie and Arnold Skolin, they faded away, or you'd get the guys that would just drop down the card like Pedro Morales and just gradually disappear. He didn't want that to happen to him. He liked being a part of it. So when they got to the point where they realized like he can't really do the weekly TV anymore, and he didn't want to anymore. It was a lot. So they said, okay, well, here's this other thing you can do. What if we make you the president where you're respected? It's not going to come out of left field. Fans will buy that you would be a great president, babyface president, and it requires so much less work. Because if you really think about it, what did he do? Every few weeks, he wasn't even on every week. It's not like today with Adam Pearce and Nick Aldis. Every couple of weeks, he might come out for a couple of minutes, make some proclamation, or appear on the little screen. And then what would he do? He'd go to the back, probably hang out in the gorilla position, play cards with Pat Patterson, or hang with Bruce Pritchard. And, it was easy. And I think at that point, he was looking for easy. He was no longer as plugged in anymore. I don't think he was producing much anymore. He was just, and I also write in the book how he was the first WWF president who really was only a television character. Because even though Jack Tunney was not the actual president, Jack Tunney had a lot of responsibilities. He was running the Canadian office. He was an actual promoter. Hisashi Shinma, who had been the president before, was the vice president of New Japan. Like, he was an important. Willie Gilzenberg, the original WWF president, he was a major promoter in the company. He was a mover and shaker behind the scenes. Gorilla Monsoon was strictly a television character, which is now what you have today, too.
He didn't have any other backstage roles when he was president?
I don't believe so. I think
No.
by the time he was president, he wasn't even like, giving advice or working Gorilla that much,
Really?
working the position. No, I think he was kind of done with it by that point. He would be somebody you might go to for advice, but his period of really being heavily involved started to go away even by the end of the 80s, because that's when his health started to slip. So in those early years of the expansion, when he's doing commentary like 84, 85, 86, 87, he's still very much involved behind the scenes too. But then when you get to 80, he has his first major heart attack. He misses the first Royal Rumble, which he was supposed to call. In 1990, his diabetes gets so bad he has to have part of his foot removed. And he starts having these,
wow.
yeah, he starts having some of these mini heart attacks and things until the really big one in 97. So at that point, like he's not doing as much anymore. He's getting old, but he wasn't that old, but his health was in rough shape, and
Yeah,
he was just getting tired.
I thought he was a really good president. I mean, in as much as whatever you expect, Tunney was always a little awkward, and you never knew who this guy was, like where he came from, where getting the authority.
Right.
You had years and years of being familiar with Monsoon, and what I think a lot of fans remember from that run was the segment with Vader when Vader just came in, and that was great. I mean, I remember that really getting me excited for WWE, because they were so over the top cartoony at that point.
That's true.
Having Vader come in and manhandle, an official executive, Monsoon's beloved figure, had a kind of a realism that we hadn't seen in a while, and I thought Monsoon played it fantastically.
Yeah, and the president thing for him was different. Like you said with Tunney was not a heel president, but he seemed kind of clueless at times, and I think it was intentional. Like he could be very frustrating. Sometimes he'd rule in favor of the good guys, but a lot of times he would act oblivious to things that heels had done, and he would give these rulings that I think were intended to frustrate fans. Whereas with Gorilla, they went all out. We're going to have a president for the fans, and he's going to make the calls that the fans want. Of course, the major exception being WrestleMania 12, where I think he turned off all the Bret Hart fans when he called for the Iron Man match to be continued. But still, at least then it was still in the service of another babyface, Shawn Michaels. But the Vader thing, like you said, it's probably the thing that his presidency is most remembered for. It was something that he was totally on board with because he liked the idea of helping Vader. It also served the purpose of getting Vader off TV because he needed surgery right away. It was very bad timing. He got signed and then immediately needed shoulder surgery. But what they did was they set him up to be a monster for when he came back to go against Shawn Michaels. Now, we could argue, I mean, I think most people would agree that he never quite lived up to his potential. People thought he was going to replicate what he did in WCW, and it never happened for a variety of reasons. But it's not for lack of trying. I mean, they really gave him the works there. Gorilla didn't do that for anybody. I mean, it was very rare, if ever, that he got physically involved. Nobody put their hands on him. Yeah. And so for him to give Vader that was a big deal, and do it live in front of fans like that. I think part of it was he saw in Vader was like the 90s version of what Gorilla Monsoon had been in the 60s. They were of comparable size. In fact, I think Gorilla at his biggest may have been even a little bigger than Vader. They both were monster heels, and they both worked a similar style. Very agile, very quick, big men. Also like a Bam Bam Bigelow would be in that mold too. So I think he was really okay with doing that. I mean, I talked to Jim Cornette for the book. Chris Cornette was in the ring when it happened. And he was very much a part of the planning of it because he was Vader's manager, for people that don't know. So I got a lot of info on that in the book. Yeah,
you've got a picture from his last appearance in WWE, which I remember vividly. Was WrestleMania 15, right?
Yeah.
In 1999, and I remember having not seen him in a while, and you saw him, and it really was kind of shocking. I mean, he was gaunt. And what was going on with him at that time, health wise, and how much longer did he live after that?
He lived 6 months after that, a little less than 6 months. It was very shocking. I talked to his sister, Amy. He has 2 living sisters because they were from their father's second marriage, and they're significantly younger than Gorilla. And so I talked to his sister. She was living in Las Vegas. She's still there. So she didn't see him a lot in those days. And she saw him at WrestleMania and was shocked. And she called him and Maureen and were just like, is Robert okay? You know, what's happening? So he knew at that point that he was dying. And that's part of why that was done. He actually chose it. I mean, he chose it. They wanted to put him on kidney dialysis. It all went back to the diabetes. His diabetes, he had been diagnosed in his late 30s. So he'd been living with it for 20 years plus. And he just stopped taking care of himself. He was supposed to be on insulin. I don't know how religious he was doing that. And his diet, he was just eating whatever he felt like. He was smoking. He was a heavy smoker, never quit, didn't care. And so he was having heart attacks because his heart was weakened by the diabetes, and now kidneys were failing. And he just decided, I'm going to cash in. That's it. I don't want it. I want to be with Joey. I want to be with my father and my brother. And I just don't want to be around anymore. And it's sad in a way because he was leaving his living family behind. You know, Maureen outlived him by 25 years, and they could have spent most, if not all of that together. And his grandchildren were very young, and Valerie's twin boys were babies. So it's kind of sad that he chose that, but that's what he chose. And he told people that I want to live my way. I want to die my way. And I think that WrestleMania 15 thing was intended as a goodbye. It was in Philadelphia, which was his backyard. He lived right across the bridge in South Jersey, in Southwest Jersey. So it was sort of like I said, he'd been around. He'd been going to a lot of the local shows. He just hadn't been on camera. So this was sort of like a way for him to say goodbye to fans, I think.
Was he kind of a spiritual guy? I mean, he talked about wanting to be reunited with Joey. I remember seeing something recently where he kind of briefly had his own talk show that was, it seemed sort of pseudo kind of Christian.
No, it was a variety game show. It was nothing.
Was it? I don't know.
You're talking about Bingo Break, right?
I don't know. I remember him sitting on a couch with like a co-host woman.
Well, he was Roman Catholic. He was Italian American. He was raised Roman Catholic, and you know he was I don't know if he went to church every Sunday or anything. I know they did have a church in Williamston that they did attend, and when he died, it was a Catholic funeral with a Catholic priest at the church, and you know, to that degree, I mean, I think I would say he was as religious as most Italian Catholics would have been in those days, and so he did have his belief for sure. I mean, he believed in God. He believed in Jesus, and in fact, he would always say he would always talk about the man upstairs on commentary. Could you imagine a commentator today even saying that? Cody Rhodes is thanking the man upstairs. Everybody would be up in arms. Oh, I don't want this religious crap on my wrestling. But, it's ridiculous.
And you think of like WrestleMania 15 and WWE in 1999, sort of peak attitude era. Right? I can see where he had some.
I'm not saying, but I'm not saying he was a holy roller or anything like that. I think it was more like this stuff shouldn't be on television. Like it's not like he was a choir boy. Everything they were saying and much, much worse were in his regular vocabulary. Just not on TV. He had that old school mentality. You know, kids are watching, families are watching. This is a clean product, and we gotta watch what we do. But that didn't mean in the locker room he wasn't.
No, and every once in a while something would bleed into the commentary, especially if it had to do with Pat Patterson.
I mean, he had his fun. Yeah,
I remember. How is that? As you mentioned, I know his wife passed a little while ago. The surviving family. How do they like the book?
Oh, they've been so good to me, and they love the book. Valerie helped me every step of the way. His youngest daughter, Maureen, was very helpful when she was around. She died earlier this year. In fact, actually, on my podcast soon, I'm going to be running the interview I did with her for the book, which I've never made public before. So we had a launch party at the beginning of October, and they all came up from Jersey. His daughter Sharon came with her husband Mike. Valerie came with her husband, Ed, Valerie's 2 kids, Gino Morella and Joey Morella were both there, the twin boys, and they have been so supportive. We had a nice turnout at the party. They were thrilled. They brought all their own memorabilia. We had the kayfabe New Jersey license plate.
I saw that. How great is that?
We had the medallions from the tag team championships with Gorilla Monsoon and Killer Kowalski.
Yeah.
The T-shirt from his retirement show at the Spectrum, all this kind of cool stuff. They have been so supportive. I can't thank them enough. The book is what it is in large part because of their involvement.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited to start digging into it here on my Kindle.
Let me know.
I'm happy for you, man.
Thank you.
I know you worked hard on it, and I know you're going to do him justice. I remember, I don't know how long ago, I guess it was maybe a couple years ago when you were teasing that you had an idea for your next book. And
over 3 years ago.
Is that long ago? Have we been at this that long?
Yeah.
It sounds like it came out absolutely great, and again, looking forward to going through it. You have any signings or anything that you'd want to promote?
Yeah, actually, I mean, I know those things are always local. It depends where you live and everything. But on October 26th, I'm going to be at the BST Wrestling Show, Blood, Sweat, and Tears Wrestling in Bridgeport at the Foolproof Brewery. I'll be signing books there. I've got, there's another one in November 15th, another BST Wrestling Show. Also, I don't know if you heard about that. What was that show that Bret Hart was supposed to be at where he had to cancel? What is it called? Wrestling with Character. And I'm drawing a blank on when that's happening. I'm a really bad promoter, but it's happening in Meriden, Connecticut, I believe in November. It's called Wrestling with Character. Bret Hart unfortunately had to pull out. We were going to do a book thing where we both signed the books together, but I'll still be there signing books. And then all the way in January, I'm going to be appearing at the Agawam Library in Massachusetts, signing books there. I love doing library appearances. That's January 24th because you get a lot of book lovers that come out. It's fun.
Yeah. Excellent. Great, man. Looking forward to it. All right. Thank you so much, Brian. As always, thanks to everybody for tuning in. Pick up Brian's book wherever you get books. And while you got the computer open, head on over to pwi-online.com. Pick up the PWI 500, subscribe, and get everything we do. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you, Al.